All right, this will be the first of the lectures that accompany the readings now that we've gone online. And my goal here is not to recapitulate everything that is in the readings. It is simply to hit the highlights quickly and move on. I'm counting on your participation in our discussions, the first of which should go up tonight, but more about that in a minute. And moving from there. So, for the rest of the semester, we will be focusing on a single research essay project. Everything that we do will be geared toward building the research base and the knowledge base to produce this persuasive research paper. The primary purpose of 122 is to engage you in larger scale, real research. Okay, so our readings today, beyond the one introducing the project overview, what is research, and then research and other types of source-based writing are both designed to address the question the first title asks: what is research? Your paper gives some good definitions. First, they admit that research can be defined, is casually defined as anything you do to go get an answer to a question. Outside an academic setting, totally valid. Okay. And we often, before college, use research in that sense. If you go get information to be part of a paper, we call it a research paper, which the second document makes note of, that there are all kinds of papers with sources. We tend to refer to anything that uses sources as a research paper. In that sense, I've talked about every paper in college being a resource paper, a research paper. That's true in the sense that all of them require you to go and get sources, which we do tend to define by research. We're using a stricter definition here, one that's presented in your reading. Okay, research is when you start with a question that you don't have an answer to. You go out and gather the information that is available on your subject, and then you determine the answer. You build the answer from the research that you have done. Okay, so along those lines, your readings will differentiate between a homework question and a research question. Okay, a question that you can just look up in 10 seconds on Google or find in 20 minutes, stare at some Google Maps and figure it out, is really not a research question. Okay, that's what your paper calls a homework question. The answer's out there, it's readily available, anybody can find it. It's not really debatable, it's a one-off, look it up and be done. With research, we are dealing with more advanced, more involved questions. It still can be questions of claims of fact, value, or policy. But we are diving into realms that are debatable. And with a research question, you not only have to go find the information on the subject you're interested in, but you are expected to put together that information to produce an answer. And then your research paper is your presentation of that answer and why you feel it is valid based on the research you have done. Okay, so that would mean that not everything that we go gather information at the library or online for at school is a research paper. So what then is a research paper? A research paper starts with a question and is really differentiated by the timing at which the thesis arrives. With a source-based paper, you have your thesis in mind from the beginning, and you go to find the sources you need to make the argument that you already know is correct. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that kind of paper, it's just not a research paper. A research paper, as we are defining it in this class, and as you will be working with it for the rest of the semester, is a paper in which you start with a question to which you don't know the answer, and you go out to gather the information and learn about it and find the answer in the process. So there's going to come a point where you move from researching and trying to decide what the answer to the paper what the answer to your question is, to writing, which happens once you've done enough research to feel like you have a solid, defendable answer to that research question, and you're ready to share it with people. Now, you may still have to gather more information to do more research in terms of gathering information before that paper is done. You may find new questions in trying to support your question that have to be answered, and you may just need to gather more info in a more source-based format to support your main argument after you've decided on your position. But that's what we'll be working on. You'll be writing a very long paper which will derive first from a question that you have about a topic of your choice. And that question needs to be something debatable and something that you are going to learn the answer to in the process of putting the paper together. Once you've done your research and done enough to feel like you have come to a defendable conclusion, then we'll begin putting the paper together. So you'll notice that for the first 2 weeks, right up until the 17th, our work is based around research questions, looking at sources, finding an answer. I am deliberately giving you a bunch of time to invest in gathering materials and finding first a question and then learning enough about it to come to at least a working thesis, a probable answer that you will continue to refine as we move forward and begin writing. So the discussion today asks you to look at your most recent writing project. That would be the quantitative analysis, and to describe whether it was, it would be the quantitative analysis in this class. It may be in some other source of writing. The paper even allows for you to do non-academic writing if that's what you remember best. Okay. And you're going to say whether it was a research writing project or a source-based writing project. I would recommend any of the papers we've done this semester as a focus for this discussion. And the idea is to look at it and say, well, was it research or was it source-based? And you can tell by two things. One, did you start with a question in your own mind? Did this paper come from a place where you legitimately weren't sure of the answer and set out to find the answer? And then two, when did your thesis occur? If your thesis occurred real early and you just went looking for information to prove your point, it was probably a source-based paper. If you started with a question and you did a whole bunch of research and gathered your materials, and then after having read and studied for a while, decided on your answer a ways into the project, you're much more likely to have been doing actual research. That is, you went out and discovered the answer in the process instead of starting with it and looking for sources to prove your point. I will be back on here daily looking at these things. Let me recap real quick what we've done so far today. We talked about what is research. Research is when you start with a question that is difficult. It can't just be looked up and you get the answer right away, like what is the capital of Australia? It's Canberra, if you want to know. But one that requires you to go out and gather information and then to put that information together to find an answer. That's research, okay? And the kind of question that leads to that search for knowledge is a research question. What is the difference between research and other source-based writings? Well, if you're doing research, you started with a question and you legitimately didn't know the answer. You will discover the answer during the research portion of your project, at which point, about halfway or 2/3 of the way through, depending on how much research was required, you're going to shift focus and begin working on communicating the answer you learned in your research to your audience. If it was source-based writing, then you either had the idea from the beginning and were looking for sources to prove your point, or you found it pretty quick. You pretty much started with the thesis, and the research was mainly to find proof of something you already believed. Okay? So, research is a search for new knowledge, where we go out and gather what's available and put that information together to reach a conclusion that we couldn't have reached at the beginning. And a research paper is a paper that communicates what one finds while doing research. In other words, you start with a question, and you are well engaged in research and study for some time before you're able to say, this is my thesis, this is what I believe, because you have to learn it and put the information together first. Source-based writing may involve going to the library or going online to get information to help us prove our point, but we already know the point when we begin. We've done a heck of a lot of source-based writing this year. We're going to spend the rest of this semester doing research.